Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my Cedar Point Recreation Park. Today we are heading down Millennium Midway to do some more station builds over here. As we've now finished with the basic layout with buildings and roads and things, I noticed that there was a bit of space that we could take advantage of here by moving the railroad back a little bit, which should give us some more room for Millennium Force a little bit later on. So I do want to make the hill a little bit taller to give it a little bit more speed and make the hill look a little bit nicer. But we're not doing Millennium Forest today. Instead, we will be looking at Rougarou, previously known as Mantis. Maybe a bit of an underrated or underappreciated coaster these days, especially when it had its stand-up trains, even though I quite liked those a lot back when I was a kid. All the same, we have a relatively simple station build going on here. We've got a pretty normal building over the river here. A couple building layers of the mechanical theming pieces and platforms, but nothing too crazy compared to the real thing. We can get some nice replication of the theming around the top of the station with some of this abstract wall. And I think it looked pretty nice. Just adding a lot of different textures on here that made for a pretty good looking building. Even if, as always, the shape is a little bit plain. Had a little bit of concern with some of the track going over top of it, a little bit too close to the roof. So I made the station probably one tile shorter than it should have been, because I didn't want to mess with the track layout, because I think it's already pretty good. But I think what we have here worked out okay. So a good majority of this build is going to be on some custom supports. I talked about this a little bit in an earlier episode about how some of these B&M coasters and their big supports are hard to do in RCT. And I really need to get myself into the habit of making them where I feel it's appropriate. I'll have to go back to Raptor and Gatekeeper and Valraven to do a little bit more work on them. But I feel like Rougarou was a good place to really get into some details with the custom support work. One thing which I always make sure to do for B&M coasters in RCT is to hide about half of the supports that the game puts in. It puts in way too many supports compared to what you'd find on a normal coaster. And it looks a little bit messy. So I like to use the tile inspector to hide a bunch of those, and it winds up making it look a lot nicer. And we're also using some single rail coaster track for our diagonal supports on the loop, and also the diagonal support piece, just the plain scenery piece, for a lot of extra support for the rest of the layout. It can be a bit tricky to get it to line up correctly, since usually the supports are in the middle of the tile, but that scenery piece is in the corner. So it can take a bit of time playing around with it to get it to look quite right. But I can definitely tell, as now that I've done quite a few of these coaster stations and backlot infrastructure and everything for the previous coasters, I'm definitely getting faster at doing this, because I know what I think looks good, and I'm getting a lot better at the different techniques I'm using. So I was able to knock this one out pretty quickly, even with all the extra custom support work and everything. So that's always nice. Still struggling a little bit with the queues though. I keep having this problem where I use some proxy path for the queues, and then something will go wrong and the queue will break, and I don't know what happened, so I have to mess with the queue a whole bunch to get it to work again. Had that happen twice during this build, which is very annoying. It's not the worst thing to happen for sure, but it just goes to show that it's important to get these queues hammered out first as far as layout goes before you start proxying them up. Just like with a coaster layout, you want to make sure you get the main design down first before you start messing with scenery and stuff to support it. But after we got all that scenery in here, I am quite liking the look of this plot particularly. There's not a ton of detail in the backlot, but just adding those trees and the different ground textures going on here, some fencing, the awning over the queue, a lot of little details, but they add up to make something that looks pretty good. It's nice that I don't think there will be a whole lot of extra work to do on the Rougarou area when we come back for final tweaks and detailing and things. This midway is going to be tricky in general. I started adding in some of the main midway path here, but I'm already seeing how it's going to be an issue with the pathing, since with the way I've laid things out, the midway is kind of diagonal here, so having it go through the railroad and moving along the water correctly, it's going to be a little bit tricky. We're going to probably have a lot of weird diagonal paths here, using some diagonal coaster for fence, something like that. Details for a later phase. Hopefully it won't be too complicated once we get there. I'm not looking forward to it very much because it's a lot of tedious, busy work, but hopefully it will all be worth it in the end. But anyway, I think that's going to about do it for today. Like I said, not a lot of complicated stuff going on here, just a lot of little details that add up to make a pretty nice looking plot. So I'm very happy with how things have gone today. Looking forward to getting more of the Millennium Midway down, as this part of the park is pretty sparsely populated, as I've said before. I think we'll probably continue making our way up this Midway here the next couple episodes. But until then, hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, if you've got any comments, questions, suggestions, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.